bring her this time.
Yes.
Hey everyone, my name is Wesley Kirkland. I think I probably know almost everyone by now. Tonight I'm going to be talking about over-engineering your internet presence. It's going to be more of a shorter talk tonight, unfortunately, but please do ask questions and we will go on from that. I was telling Ben earlier when I'm reading my speaker notes here, and when I wrote it, it was still going to be an in-person, so that's not happening anymore. Whoops. So anyways, so my name is Wesley Kirkland. I'm currently a senior cloud engineer at Ministry Brands. List of my various accomplishments that I'm actually proud of. There's a couple that aren't listed on here for other companies, so on and so forth. But my personal favorite one is being labeled as the meme master of disaster. And kind of random, but at this rate, my titles are changing just as fast as my bosses. So we'll see how long until I get a new one of either. Just to start off, I'm pretty sure everyone's probably seen it before, but back, I actually used to have this hanging in my desk at one of my previous jobs. It's not DNS. There's no way it's DNS. It was DNS, as the issue almost always is. So a quick note, a lot of what I'm actually describing tonight, I've learned at my current company, Ministry Brands, primarily through acquisitions, seeing just other websites by myself. And it's supposed to be more of a generalized guide of concepts, and I'm applying more old school IT methodology and concepts to modern internet presence. This probably will be the last talk I actually ever give on a web specific subject, as I no longer operate in that space. If you like them, I'm sorry. There's probably like one person for that though, but oh well. So 1 second. So on a typical structure, if you just go out, look at say a small company or an individual, you go out and you're going to buy your main domain. We'll just use example.com for all intents and purposes. So you're going to go out and buy example.com, and I know probably not a lot of this crowd is going to do it, but what I've seen historically is the small business, they're going to go out and buy example.com with network solutions specifically. Network solutions is they were the first internet register, so they've got #1 there. But a lot of people have that weird concept of not putting all your eggs in one basket. So you'll go out and buy .com there, and you'll go out and buy the .net or the .net and the .org domains, or say GoDaddy, Namecheap, Fat Cow, or whatever. All are oddly real. And then, so you have that weird division, and you're already going to start having issues, specifically with payment lapsing and other things like that. And what you'll also see is on the redirects, a lot of times is, hey, this website may accept HTTPS. It most likely not, or most likely will not. But at a bare minimum, I can almost guarantee it's not ever going to auto upgrade HTTPS, which is already going to kill off your SEO results as a company from there. And then typically with these very small businesses, organizations, you're going to have your DNS. It's going to be at the registrar level. Everyone's probably been around long enough to realize, hey, we probably need to go toss our DNS inside of AWS or Cloudflare or NS1, Infoblox, whatever from there. And then they'll have just a generic Gmail instance or 365. Heck, like you may even just end up with my company name at gmail.com. And then on the security aspect, there's going to be zero domain security. There might be an SPF, most likely it'll be broken. There's not going to be any DMARC. Like I said, there's not going to be generally any SSL, no auto upgrades, or so on. So that's the structure that we generally see. And I know this seems very dumb and basic. What I can tell you is from doing 50 plus acquisitions and combing through them over the years, this is the norm. Like almost always it is the norm. Sometimes, like even on email, you'll see 3 to 5 different instances split across. So we can take this, we can go in, get some basic improvement. #1, don't listen to the all my eggs in one basket adage, especially for domains. You can put them all in one basket. GoDaddy's fine. I have my issues with them, but honestly, they're about the best consumer registrar for this. And this is where, when you're actually growing as a company, setting up just this basic prep work and hopefully someone at some point sees this talk and listens to it. But the basic prep work of saying, hey, let's get a registrar or DNS provider, make sure they have an API, make sure we can do MFA to them, and get it there. And so another thing too, and this is kind of crossing over into some old talks as well, but registering a domain name, by default, we're going to go out and say the domain's registered to Wesley Kirkland, and that's just me. Well, I think everyone, or some people, have at least heard my rant towards Armenia, and to where countries can do their own specific things, and very few countries actually require you to register the domain to a person. Like .us domains do require that, but you can always register it to your legal business entity, because at that point anyone can take that business entity paperwork and reclaim any ownership or any legal or questionable issues going on with it. But to go on from that, a lot of common TLDs. So like I said, a lot of people are going to buy .com, .net, .org, so on and so forth there. It may be worth go ahead and getting like mybusiness.app, mybusiness.dev. Those do actually exist for a reason, and there are a lot of historical concepts of going around of actually segmenting out your traffic, especially with .app, of it being .app is star.app is in the HSTS preload list, so we can automatically, as an organization, without doing too much effort, go ahead and enable SSL for our endpoint. Same thing with any company. And then on the redirects, generally what I'll start to see here, and John on this call and I have dissected so many of these, but going through the redirects from every organization, I cannot tell you just how many redirects we've seen in DNS Made Easy, Hover, and specifically GoDaddy, and they're very hard to figure out from there. And the redirects are very basic. I got bit on a redirect set recently, and it was in Hover, and it said example.com/API redirects to GitHub API docs, when in reality it was that /API, and it was also api.example.com. So they're very hard to actually dissect from there. And then the next basic improvement that any company can take on this is going to be pick a DNS provider. Like I said, MFA earlier, it provides a solid API. Route 53, Cloudflare, NS1, any provider out there, technically even like DNS Made Easy or DN Simple, all offer these same things as well. Just the primary concept is actually moving DNS out from the domain registrar as a whole, because then we can automatically have flexibility of porting our domain out. We're not hostage to one company. We can go and move our DNS between companies. We can go and move our domain more easily. Whenever you do a migration during acquisition or divestiture, say, here's the domain, here's the zone, be done. No one wants it anymore. And on email, a lot of times what we can actually do is 365 offers it less than G Suite specifically, but go in and just do a secondary domain. If you have your net, org, com, so on and so forth, they can all be secondary domains. If you have a common misspelling, which I'll get into in a minute, do that. And then the aspect too, and I actually got asked this at work today, even though I don't do my old job anymore. But hey, what is the basic security footprint? Like specifically with DMARC, and I know I've covered this topic before, but if you just start DMARC from the get-go, like you buy a domain, you set it up, and you just go from there, and your full P equals reject. In my opinion, and from what I've professionally seen, you will never have to pay for an aggregator in your life. The aggregators always say, hey, let's do this. But if you just, it's the one thing, if you just do it right from the get-go, and you're not a huge multinational organization, for example, you will never have to pay these outrageous aggregator fees, because they are very outrageous as a whole. And then on the security aspect as well, Namecheap is very bad for this, but you can go out and say, well, I'm just going to buy the cheapest SSL certificate. Same thing on GoDaddy, so on and so forth. Setting up from the starting point of success, just picking a single provider. Like even if you have one provider for SSL, hopefully it's probably Let's Encrypt, assuming, well, it should be any modern app stack. But Let's Encrypt over here, then we've got our DNS and then our domain provider, so on and so forth. And then too, just actually enforcing automatic SSL upgrades. That is probably one of the most basic things anyone can do on it. And so for next, advanced improvement. And this is the last slide of this. So getting more of more than medium-sized business. So you can register all of your primary domains, of course, a single provider. But one of the crucial things to start looking in here is look at misspellings. There are providers, I'm not going to name any specifically tonight, but they will go through and they will actually develop misspelling lists for you. You can also do this. There's some alternative websites, and get these misspellings if it's just one character off, or if you have like X in your domain, getting a misspelling with a Z and a C, very, very, very common typos. Like foxnews.com, for example, they own foxnews.com. It's very common redirect error. And one that I always like to preach, it enriches the Colombians, but buying .co is always a great idea. They're dirt cheap. Columbia fully acknowledges what they're doing. Same thing with like TV for Tuvalu. But just these very generic typos. And so the next one is going to be on more advanced level redirects, specifically with click tracking. I was at a conference one time, and I think it was IHG, the hotel chain that owns like Holiday Inn Express, so on and so forth. On all of their domains, what they actually ended up doing is they redirected them, but they always appended a query string. This was through one very specific service, but several services support it. Google it, you'll find the service. But when they redirected it, the accepting websites, say ihg.com, they automatically logged that in their click analytics with like Google Analytics. So that way they actually had down to the click tracking of where did their web traffic come from on the redirects. And I know me specifically, I never really believed in the whole, well, let me just redirect junk domains. Like my, or I've seen a domain, closethebackdoor.com. It sounds like a really awesome security domain. And I can never imagine anyone just going into Google and typing closethebackdoor.com and expecting it to go anywhere. I myself would Google it, and I feel like most people would. But when I actually check these redirect results for this or for just any domain, I'm blown away with how many people actually just completely typo just any amount of domains here. And even just going through and buying like the marketing phrases as I was describing before. And so on DNS as a whole, one thing that we've really kind of, it's been kind of an inadvertent happy accident, but we've standardized upon name servers, specifically like with Route 53. It's not 100% up to snuff on the spec. You can still trace back the AWS name servers, but it works for everything that we're doing. And one thing that we've always kind of advertised on it, if for some reason we actually have to do DR, disaster recovery, on our DNS, instead of going through, say, like if you go in with Azure or AWS and click, I want a DNS zone, you get random 4 set of name servers. By doing vanity white or by doing vanity name servers, we can pre-stage all of our DNS in a destination, and then we can automatically change our glue records within a couple minutes to an hour. We're automatically swung over between providers for thousands upon thousands upon thousands of zones. But it's really useful for these DR situations as a whole, and also just kind of standardizing your web footprint. One thing you can see within a lot of larger companies, especially like Google, for example, you go look at a whois record for anything, it's going to be the same like 2 to 3 sets of information. It's always going to say Google. It's always going to have these name servers, but it's fingerprinting your organization a little bit online. It's kind of interesting, but either way on it. And then on the email perspective too, so we've already got all these domains. So say example.com is your primary. We're going to add .net, .org, secondary domains. Let's add our .co. Let's add our misspellings, because all of these domains are actually going to come back in as Wesley at example.com in our email provider. And then on security too. One thing I don't do this myself, but I wish that I did, even on my personal domains, is implement a CA record. You can actually generate these off the bat or on the fly, build a quick API for it, because all of the certificate information is actually logged open source, not semi, using that word wrong, but into CT logs or certificate transparency logs. And the logs we can actually go in, openly read through various APIs, and we can build this up and prevent our domain from being hijacked potentially by a misissuing CA. There have been many of those. Everyone probably remembers the whole semantic incident a couple years ago. So next is, we can go fishing on this. So the first two domains in here, Salesforce and PayPal, I've got them open on another tab. I can go to, actually, yeah, here. Oh, no, I'm not sharing the right screen. Darn it. But we right now can actually go into here and see this is clearly an issue right now. But as of last night, both these domains were available. And depending on your domain registrar, they can actually help you buy these, but they're IDNs, homographs, honeycode attacks, all just a variety of them. And last year, it was actually like, I think March or February of last year, I did this. It was in my last talk. Namecheap took down my domain like an hour before. I got it back after I explained to them that they couldn't do what they did. But you can go out. There's nothing stopping us for $8-10. Go out and buy Salesforce.com. I can send this to anyone. It's going to look like Salesforce. We can just do or just do real Salesforce in English and change the link under the hood. No one's ever going to notice a difference in like tiny 6-8 point font. And congrats, you can do this. And there's a story here too. I was at a vendor conference, and there was a company called SegaSec presenting there. And they went through, or the founder of the company went through a demo, and he was like, what's wrong in this picture? He went to PayPal.com, logged in, had full SSL, looked like PayPal.com, and he had $1 billion in his bank account. There are plenty of malware tools out there. We can go in, we can get a man-in-the-middle proxy, run it on our PayPal.com here, and do DOM object manipulation. And congrats, we've still got the full MFA session. People do this all the time with 365. You can do a single page application and say an Azure static website, do a Azure CDN in front of it. You've got full SSL, completely legit domain and everything. And then one that I do want to cover is joke domains. So at my work, we for about a year we had a joke. So we're ministeredbrands.com, and if I want to fish people, I was like, well, I'll just go out and buy ministeredbands.com. The very common redirect domains, we actually ended up acquiring it, and it was kind of good because it turns out there also is a website called ministeryband.com. So now we're at least one hop away of hopefully not having a horrific misspelling, because for my employer's image, ministeryband.com is not a valid website that any of our customers should ever go to. And I can provide links later, but on the homograph attacks, but it's simple, just Latin characters. Generally, you cannot combine Latin, like let's say Cyrillic, but you can do Latin and Latin alternative characters. So extending our tool set. This is what I think is really interesting, and what we've really kind of strived to build internally, and what I've also talked to other people about. And this gets into a lot of more, what can we actually build or apply a traditional IT mindset concept to, one of which is custom tooling. Most of the time, hey, I've got 5-10 domains, let me just go in, clicky, so on and so forth. But when you're working in the orders of hundreds of domains, or as I used to, quite literally 3,000 to 5,000 domains in a month, clicky just isn't going to work anymore. We've got to have some sort of custom tooling. And the tooling always has to support CRUD operations, as well as just export and import backups. This is something I've actually never seen another company do in my life. And I was at a conference, and I was talking to, there's a guy representing a big multinational company. And I was talking to him, asking, he's like, hey, this is what we do. And they were just absolutely blown away that anyone ever backed it up. But like from my perspective, we've actually had to restore backups, a full backup one time when someone just deleted a zone outright by accident, and partial backups from time to time. But and the old backup methodology for us is, or really for anyone, is going in praying, hey, does Google have something? Does anyone remember what the DNS record is going to be? Or going to DNS trails by security trails. I can't tell you the amount of times that I've had to do that, as well as that combined with a couple other things, driving one of my coworkers into government work, unfortunately. But one thing that I always think is kind of intriguing is we can actually take our backup methodology here and not necessarily think of it as, well, here's a very proprietary backup format, but we can take it and say DNS at its core it's a text file. So we can change the text file and put it in, say, a CSV. There's nothing wrong with that. And we can do reporting from there. And when you're working in the scale of these hundreds of thousands of domains, one thing that I've always seen as kind of interesting is if you're doing a decom ticket or you're doing a migration, everyone knows like the 2 to 3 primary places that a record is used, but you never actually know where it is fully used. Doing the decom right now, go in, we just look at a CIDR range. Hey, look, we found it in literally 10 plus other places. So having that in there, as well as in the reporting aspect, traditionally too, if you're in a colo, for example, you have your CIDR range. We can go in, we can do a pen test on our CIDR range, but that's a lot harder to do with a more modern cloud architecture. So one thing I've actually had to do quite a few times is actually take our DNS backups, report on them, and we've been asked, hey, where is this webmin port? Where is this RDP port open to the world? And just being able to have this and go through and report on it has been phenomenal. For some companies, you can just go in and say, hey, let me just ask AWS or Azure where everything is. But if you're multi-cloud, if you still have colos, if you still have random applications still out there, your DNS is honestly a gold mine of what you can do, as well as you can also identify a lot of your external infrastructure as a whole. And another one, just kind of extending your tool set mindset, is syncing metadata. We internally use this to do cross or business showback billing. So that way we can say the business unit is this, but we can actually link that up via all the providers' APIs and figure out where are the costs being divided out everywhere. So that way we're not saying, well, this AWS account is dedicated to business unit 1, this one's to 2, so on and so forth. We can have a single shared one with all of our permissioning and management and security on top, and then we can still bill it out effectively from there. I just had to put a joke in it, but I was trying to find a problem with my DNS, but I couldn't come to a resolution. Is it going to show? There it is. And the last thing I actually want to talk about, and this is what I think is just absurdly cool to do. And this came from a pet project that John on here and I actually worked on at our employer, but was Ssl Discovery. So I've talked to DigiCert. I've talked to, starts with a V. It's a big certificate automation tool. Venafi, DigiCert, Venafi, so many others, and say, hey, we want to find all of our SSL certs. And every one of them comes back and says, give us a list of IPs or put a scanner on your network. That doesn't work. So what we can actually do is take the reporting elements that we've actually had before, and we can easily build upon them. So what actually happened in this story, so we had SSLs continuously expiring, specifically issues with wildcards, because as everyone knows, a wildcard can go basically anywhere. So we would know, hey, get the www, get the app, get this other high profile one, and the apex, and let's be done. But you forget about that it's on the VPN endpoint, for example. And specifically too, this was our executive leadership's #1 request, was fix SSL expiration. And this is where I always kind of get into trouble with policies of, I don't believe in human automation for this, I believe in computer automation as a whole. And human automation, some people tried it, they believed it was the best way, they got buy-in, so on and so forth, but it was, hey, let's go and do it. That broke down within like 3 months. We were able to take our initial list, find all the DNS endpoints, and provide it to them. But what we as a team did was go in and say, we're just going to start logging this all the time. And what we actually what ended up happening was we found new endpoints being added. And so someone go add an endpoint, someone found the PFX for the certificate, go and put it on. 2 months later, and certificate expires. Well, that's a problem because no one submitted a ticket for, hey, it's going to be there. So the way that we can actually extend upon this is we can take the actual backup mechanism that we've built for reporting purposes. We can take it every night, compare it against our gold master list domains, for example, or you can just take the raw DNS itself. And this really starts to kind of break down with subzone delegations, but depends on your infrastructure from there. But what we can do is, now that we have this, once again, compare it against our master list, filter it down by the zone, exclude common records that will never validate. So for example, Zendesk 1 through 4.my or .example.com. Or if you have MSOID for 365, the same thing for like docs going to ghs.googlehosted.com or whatever. So we can filter all those out, and then what we can actually do is compare all of this against CT logs on that I was describing earlier. So the CT logs, for anything modern, unless you explicitly opt not to publish, and if you do, browsers such as Chrome are actually going to bite your users in the butt for it, or bite you in the butt for it, because it's just not going to validate. Google was very adamant in getting CT logs out there. So we can go out, we can ask all the CT logs via direct or an API, say, hey, please show me all SSL certificates. Now that we have that, we can also say filter, hey, I just want active ones. Well, here's 3 wildcards because for some reason we have that. Big waste of money. And here are literally 12 to 15 other ones. So we can take those, match them all down to our DNS entries, and on the wildcard ones, what we can do is we can just use basic comparison logic and string replacement, go in and figure out where all could this apply. Well, now that we know that, let's go test all the endpoints, say, hey, I'd like to know your SSL information, please give it to me. Log all that out to some sort of table, whether it's NoSQL or SQL, doesn't matter for this. And then build another process, preferably a pipeline is what we ended up doing, but take that and build a concatenation of sorts. So for example, if you have one zone and you have 2,000 subdom or 2,000 A records on it, those 2,000 A records are all going to use the same thing with a couple IPs, CNAME, so on and so forth. We don't need 2,000 entries. All we need is 10 to 15 entries for it. So what we ended up doing was taking making effectively concatenated primary key, thumbprint, / record value for the DNS name. And then we can actually take all that, log it out to monitoring tool, pingdom, so on and so forth from there. And then congrats. From this point, and this is probably one of the favorite tools I've ever helped develop in my life or my career per se, but we can actually take this and within, in our case, 7 days, we can actually get faster if we pay a little bit of money for an API. But within 7 days, if you publish an SSL endpoint on any company managed domain / DNS, we're going to find it, we're automatically going to log it, and we can alert on it before it expires. And we can even do custom alerts for Let's Encrypt because those are going to renew differently than others, so on and so forth. And at this point, my talk is done. One thing I do want to point out too is I've got a couple of these coming out. The Mimecast one was actually supposed to be studied today or released today, and there's another one coming. I'm going to try and announce them on LinkedIn and Twitter when they do. But for more information on this and some of the practices that we've actually been able to do, a lot of it is going to be publicly available in here. If you don't go download them, that's perfectly fine. It's not going to offend me. Contact information as usual, and that is my talk. Thank you for joining. Ben, are you coming back? You're on mute.
Okay, there we go. I see some applause. So this is applause. Hey, look at that. Everybody.
Oh, yay.
Hey. All right. See what we got here. All right. So I guess we can, I don't see any questions in the queue, but we can reconvene to the floor and continue chatting. And I guess if we have other questions that we'd like to send by you, we could throw them out there. How about that?
All righty.
Wait, Andy Cowell has a raised hand. Andy Cowell, come forward and be recognized.
Great talk. Thanks. One thing you mentioned, and I might have missed the explanation. I don't know what it is. You mentioned an aggregator at one point.
CT logs, you mean, or
what was that?
On the CT logs, or what slide was it?
It wasn't on your slide, I don't think, but you had mentioned that aggregators can be very expensive.
Oh, DMARC aggregators. Yes.
Okay.
So
some of that fancy modern DNS stuff I don't really understand, huh?
Real quick. You can see I apparently like cooking a lot. So I've done a lot of business with this company as a whole, but we can start to see what I always think is intriguing here is how they're actually saying DMARC capable messages. And this is just common browsing throughout the industry, where it's not actually the aggregate reports that they as a provider are getting. It's the sum of how many emails the report said that you sent. So you could get, say, 10,000 reports, so only 10,000 messages that the aggregator has to process, but it says you did 5 million messages a month. And congrats, now you owe them, in this case, $500. And it's a problem that I have with many, but so what I always suggest doing, so for example, on my domain here, whenever you go and buy a domain, just a simple, you can turn on forensics, you can send it to wherever, you can black hole them, send them to a mailbox, whatever. But just setting up a domain from scratch, doing the P equals reject is going to give you 100% email security straight from the get-go. And then combine, of course, too, with whatever your SPF is, but DMARC's always going to override it. And that's what I was getting at, Andy.
Okay. Cool. All right.
You
Thanks.
saved in the long run for like 5 minutes up front.
All right. Do I see any other hands? Going once. Then we shall say we'll go ahead and stop the recording.